Bucknuts, welcome to the Bucknuts Morning 5 here on Wednesday, June 14th, 2017. I am Dave Biddle, and I'm very happy to be joined by Patrick Murphy. We're going to talk about depth chart battles on Ohio State's football team on today's show. I hear everybody out there rejoicing, people thinking we've been talking too much basketball. You're going to like today's show, all about football. Now, there are not a lot of starting spots that are up for grabs, obviously, Patrick, but let's take a close look at the few spots that do have openings or possible openings. Let's start with right guard. Matt Burrell left the spring as the starter there. Demetrius Knox had been the first teamer during spring until he got in Urban Meyer's doghouse for a violation of team rules. Malcolm Pridgeon might be in the mix. Some fans are hoping true freshman Wyatt Davis gets in the mix, Patrick. Who do you think will earn the job during camp?
Yeah, I think ideally you want Malcolm Pridgeon to probably earn the starting spot there. That's, obviously the opening spot. You want Isaiah Prince at right tackle to kind of come into his own after struggling last year and, cement that spot. So I think, he's the most experienced of these guys. You mentioned both Knox and Burrell. Knox was the one who came in last year from Michael Jordan in the Fiesta Bowl when he got dinged up and struggled there, but I thought looked pretty good in spring until, as you mentioned, he kind of got knocked back due to some issues off the field. Burrell played well in the spring game though, and that was a positive sign. He's a guy that they've kind of wanted to start to catch on, I think is kind of how Myers talked about him. And we started to see some signs of that. So I think it's good that they have this issue because, it doesn't necessarily mean that one guy hasn't stepped up, but maybe that, all three guys are showing some different things, and the summer will be big for them to keep the battle going. And then in the fall camp, and I think at this point it's may the best man win. I think Malcolm Pridgeon's probably the most naturally talented of them all. But if he's not bringing it, you want the guy who's going to go out there and gel best with the other four guys on the line and really battle.
Moving on to the wide receivers, who do you think the three starting wide receivers will be? I know H-back is pretty obvious, but who do you think will be the starting trio of wideouts for the Buckeyes?
Yeah, I think Benjamin Victor's obviously the name that's kind of caught fire the second half of last year. He's got the size, the speed, obviously played the most of the freshmen, but I've always liked Austin Mack. I think his name kind of got lost after being pretty hyped in recruiting and early on. I think those two are gonna really battle in the fall, and I assume they'll play. I was looking through some stuff yesterday. Zach Smith said he wanted to have 6 guys, so it wouldn't surprise me if those two are kind of rotating at one of the wide receiver spots. Out on the other side, I think Terry McLaurin's the guy. He's another guy who wasn't a super highly recruited guy, but I know Kevin Wilson likes him. He recruited him at Indiana, and Zach Smith included, talked this spring about how he's really matured, how he could be that deep ball threat that they've kind of been lacking, though, he also mentioned several other names there. But I think, after a few years in the program, Terry McLaurin's learned what it takes to be an Ohio State wide receiver. And he's waited his time, and, it wouldn't surprise me to see him out there. But, another name, Johnny Dixon, we saw a lot of good things from him in the spring game. He's got all the talent in the world. It's just going to be about health. I think KJ Hill will rotate around in there, spend some time at that H-back position too, behind Paris Campbell as well. But if I had to pick 2 opening day starters, I'd probably go Benjamin Victor and Terry McLaurin.
And moving to defense, they are so stacked at defensive end, it's ridiculous. Could there be some competition there? I mean, Tyquan Lewis and Sam Hubbard are excellent players. They're the returning starters, but Nick Bosa could break out as a star this year as a sophomore with no restrictions on him, with coming off the ACL injury his senior year in high school, so they had to obviously limit his snaps to a certain degree last year. I mean, he could break out in a big way this year. Jalen Holmes, they have him as technically a backup. And I know they can get all 4 of those guys on the field at the same time. They have Chase Young coming in as a freshman who looks great. Jonathan Cooper coming back. It's amazing. Chase Young and Jonathan Cooper might be third-team guys. Could there be some competition for starting spots up there? Or do you think Tyquan Lewis and Sam Hubbard have those jobs locked down?
I think not only could there be, but there should. Just because they're coming back, yeah, Tyquan Lewis was the Big Ten Defensive Lineman of the Year. But if, someone else is coming in and playing better, a Nick Bosa, for instance, I think, you want the best guys on the field the most. Not to say that Tyquan Lewis and Sam Hubbard aren't the best guys, but, I think they are well aware of the talent that you mentioned at the position, and they want to get the best guys out there. I also don't think it's going to matter who takes the first snap. As we saw last year with the way they rotate on the defensive line, I think that we'll see a lot of all of these guys. The young guys, maybe not quite as much with Nick Bosa excluded there, but, as you said, there's so much talent. Jalen Holmes, Nick Bosa would be, full-time starters on probably almost every other defensive line in the country. We've written a few things about Sam Hubbard potentially moving around some this year, playing some linebacker, which I think will be interesting to see how much they actually do that, because that opens a spot for, Nick Bosa or Jalen Holmes when they do that. And then kind of how they use Sam Hubbard. He's a guy who's played safety, played some linebacker in the past, so he's fine dropping in the coverage, they say, but, hasn't done it in a few years, has only done it in practice. I think it'll be interesting to see how that works and then what that opens up for some of the other guys there. And I'm excited for Jonathan Cooper, and a Chase Young, as you mentioned. Chase Young, it may take him a little while to get into the swing of things, potentially as a true freshman, but, everything I've seen on him, and especially going up against some of the best, senior and high schools last year in the All-Star game, he looks like he's going to be another very good one. So it'll be fun to watch that position, not only in fall camp, but throughout the year.
Let's analyze the corner position now. Denzel Ward appears locked in on one side. I'm going to pull a Tim May and throw three questions at you at once. Who wins the job between Kendall Sheffield and Damon Arnett? Will it even matter since they rotate so much at corners, as far as the top three guys rotating? And final question, can one of the true freshmen like Jeffrey Okudah or Sean Wade get in the mix?
I think if you're looking for, day one against Indiana, who steps out on the field, for the first defensive snap, I think it'll be Damon Arnett. I think they like the development that they saw from him. Obviously, he was that third guy with Marshawn Lattimore and Darian Conley to start last year. We saw him struggle a little bit, and Denzel Ward took full advantage of that and then became that third guy in the rotation. Or if you ask Kerry Combs, he was a third starter, not a third guy. But to answer your second question, I think it won't matter. I think once again they're going to have these guys rotating in and out. They're going to play the same amount of snaps. If they can play matchups, they probably will. I really like what we saw from Denzel Ward. I think he was a guy who relied on his speed a lot and has kind of turned that into being a solid corner. So I think, like with the defensive line, I think the rotation will be probably a positive more so than a negative. I think there's a lot of talent there, and I do think we could see some of the true freshmen. Maybe not in clutch, big moments, big snaps, but if somebody goes down, which is a possibility. I mean, they've been healthy on the defense the last few years, so they haven't necessarily had to do that. But these kids are really talented, and not to take away from the guys that are there, they've developed nicely. Obviously, Kendall Sheffield was a big time recruit when he went to Alabama, but I don't know if we've seen some guys walk into Ohio State as ready as some of these true freshmen. You mentioned Wade and Okudah, and even Marcus Williamson. I think he's probably a special teams guy this year, but he's a guy that they were impressed with, I think, this spring. So yeah, it wouldn't surprise me if they see some snaps. I think ideally you'd want them to only see snaps when the game's already out of reach, or in kind of random situations, because that means that the top three guys, I guess, are playing well. But I think they want to get these guys experience, and we've seen that they're not hesitant to put some young guys out there on defense before and see what they can do.
All right, let's close the show talking about the safety position. From talking to Greg Schiano, it sounds like Damon Webb completely has one spot locked down. That's no surprise. He's the only returning starter in the secondary. But it wasn't like Schiano was just saying, yeah, Damon Webb's a returning starter, so he's got the job. It's like he was gushing about Damon Webb, and that says a lot. I think Damon Webb's come a long way, so good for him. So then the other starting spot comes down to sophomore Jordan Fuller against senior Eric Smith. Patrick Murphy, who you got?
Yeah, just out of, veteran, experience and presence, I'm going to go with Eric Smith. The day that we talked to the safeties, I talked to both of these guys, and I'm impressed with Eric Smith just as he's grown up. Obviously dealt with a lot of injuries. His career hasn't gone the way he thought it would here. he, was a pretty highly recruited guy that's kind of fallen by the wayside because of those injuries and other guys stepping up. When I talked to both of them, I think it was Jordan Fuller that said, we don't have a starter, kind of like cornerback there. They plan on rotating, so I think we'll see a lot of Jordan Fuller. But Eric Smith agreed. He said that Jordan's had a great spring. He thought, he was step by step with him for most of the stuff. And they thought the same with Damon Webb. They thought they were all right in there together. But I think Eric Smith's bided his time. I think he's developed, assuming health. I think he'll be out there day one. But, don't expect Jordan Fuller to just let that happen. I think he'll battle, right up to the opening snap.
Yeah, I agree. I think both those guys are going to play, and they might rotate to a certain degree. We asked Shiano about that, like, will you rotate at safety? And he didn't commit to anything. It wasn't like Combs where Combs was like, yeah, we're going to definitely rotate again. And Shiano wasn't sure, but I won't be surprised if they rotate to a certain degree as far as Fuller and Smith. Maybe even getting Damon Webb a little bit of a rest sometimes and getting Fuller and Smith out there together. But it'll be fun to see. Hey, we're only about a month and a half from the start of camp, which is amazing to think about. A little more than a month and a half, but it's going to be here before we know it. Thanks very much to Patrick Murphy, and thanks to all the listeners out there for tuning into the show. I appreciate it. Hope you have a great day. Let's hear that Buckeye swag, best damn band in the land.